Morning everybody, welcome back to Indycar. My name is Gordon Ross and the Indycar is in Partick this morning. Now, the subject of this morning's broadcast is actually, there's three subjects. I've only mentioned two at the beginning of the show. The first one is a plug for Dr. Mark McNaught's show this evening at 7:30, where Dr. Mark looks at the Constitution of Scotland and how it can be used to prevent corruption in the new state. Now, last week, Mark's first show attracted over 11,000 viewers on his first ever go at a live stream. And he's had special guests from Commonweal as well, helping to contribute to the general theme of the new Scottish written constitution. Now, tonight he looks in more detail at how the constitution can be written in such a way that we can prevent the kind of corruption that we see daily at Westminster. Now, the types of things we're talking about here are where big businesses lobby politicians at Westminster. They bribe them, they offer them inducements. Frequently they give them directorships of companies as a reward for either making it easy for these companies to get new laws passed, or for preventing new legislation which might impede these companies in their pursuit of profit. Now, in Westminster, the system is set up specifically so that this kind of corruption is normal. And I say corruption, I'm talking about inducing politicians to support particular firms in their efforts to increase their profitability. There's also other methods of corrupting politicians, as we know, things like blackmail, also the vetting of politicians, and checking that they don't have a vested interest in businesses, industries, or other areas of life which would compromise their ability to work for the people. So Mark is looking at that subject tonight. He's inviting you to take part and make suggestions on things that you might like to see written into the Constitution, and how you think it would be best to protect the new Scottish state from the kind of endemic and constant sleaze and corruption that bedevils the Parliament in Westminster. Now, I'm not saying the Scottish Parliament is going to be the best in the entire world. It probably won't be, but if Mark has anything to do with it, he will ensure that when the Constitution is written, that the rights of the individuals and the citizens of Scotland are put before the interests of businesses or the interests of individual politicians. So that's one subject tonight. Mark's programme, I believe it is airing tonight at 7:30. It's a live stream and it's titled Towards a Written Constitution, or Written Scottish Constitution. You should be able to see that at 7:30 tonight. Now, I'll check with Mark about the timing of that, because I think it is 7:30, but I'm waiting to confirm that. The second subject today that came to my attention last night is a statement that was made by one of the heads of the NHS in England, who has made a statement actually this morning to everybody, to the government, to the public, to say that the NHS in England can no longer attain any of the targets that are being set for it, that they have run out of beds, they have no more capacity, and the NHS is basically about to collapse. And he's calling upon the government to accept the fact that unless funding is increased, that none of these targets will be hit. And in fact, they're going to give up trying to provide the quality of care that is demanded by people and expected by people, because they simply cannot do it anymore. The English NHS has been deliberately starved of funds by the Tory government, with the sole purpose of breaking it to the point where they can bring in private healthcare companies and make the suggestion that only private healthcare can rescue the ailing NHS. This is a tactic that the Tories have used before, where they take a public service and they starve it of funds until it collapses, and then tell you that the only way to save it is by privatising it. And that's exactly what they're going to do. You may not know this, but in the NHS in England, at least, Virgin Healthcare, which is a company, interestingly, not registered in the UK, but registered in the Virgin Islands, so it doesn't pay taxes here, has won, I think it's 82 I might be wrong on this, but I'll check the figures. I think it was something like £82 billion worth of contracts for the NHS in England. It might be 8.2, I'm not certain of the figure. But Richard Branson's company has a huge share of the GP practices and other NHS trusts set up in England to provide health care for those in England. Now, this is just the start of the privatisation of the English and Welsh NHS. It's not happening in Scotland because the Scottish NHS is devolved and it is under the purview of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government. Therefore, there is no creeping privatisation in the Scottish NHS. Yes, there are private companies which provide other services to the NHS, such as catering and laundry and other ancillary services, but the actual key parts of providing medical care in Scotland are still very much in the public sector, and we want them to stay that way. So it's worth remembering that when you hear the BBC rubbishing the Scottish NHS and saying how it's teetering on the brink and how it's failing in its targets, that the Scottish targets are far higher than the ones in England. We're looking at most of our A&E departments hitting this target or getting close to this 95% figure of people who are seen, who are examined, who are diagnosed, who are scanned, treated, and then discharged, all in the space of 4 hours. It's not just being seen within 4 hours, it's having everything, all the service provided for you, and you leaving to go home, all within 4 hours. Now, the Scottish NHS manages that for 90% of the time, which is a remarkable feat for any health service, no matter whether it's private or public. So I think the standards of Scottish healthcare are second to none anywhere on the planet. And for the BBC to keep on with this constant negative drip feed of trying to find people who will criticise the NHS is just getting a bit wearying now. We noticed, I think it was yesterday, the day before, that Reporting Scotland found one man who claimed that he had broken his ankle, and because he couldn't be bothered to wait for more than 4 hours to be seen, he went home. And then he blamed the NHS because his ankle was broken, and when he came back and got it x-rayed, it was in fact broken and he shouldn't have been walking about on it. But it now turns out that the man that the BBC interviewed is a unionist troll, as they say in Facebook terms. He's a man who's famous online for trashing the SNP, for trashing Scotland, and for providing Scotland bad stories generally. And the BBC instantly latched on to this fellow and presented him as the voice of the Scottish patient, regardless of the fact that thousands of other people have gone online to say how wonderful their treatment was and how quickly they were seen. So NHS in England is on the brink of collapse, and even the head of the NHS is saying that, and he's saying it to the British government, that they must do something, or they cannot expect, and they must tell the public not to expect the standard of care that they've had up until now. Thirdly today, this is actually not on the blurb at the front of this programme, but I was thinking about some other things that have happened recently. I noticed that Kezia Dugdale has been appointed to do something important in the Labour Party after she returned from Holyrood, and both the assistant presiding officers at Holyrood have objected strongly to this, since Dugdale had basically gone AWOL from her own party and her own constituency to do a TV show. And so nobody was that impressed when Richard Leonard offered her a new senior post in the Scottish Labour Party. But it's only to be expected. Other things that are happening at the moment in Scotland are a little bit muted, I would say. That there is some talk at the moment about using blockchain. Now, you hear this word blockchain again and again at the moment. And blockchain, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a method of keeping a public ledger, in other words, a public record of transactions. And the way it works normally is that it's used to record financial transactions online. And because it's not based on one computer system, but millions of computer systems, no one person can hack it. And if any of the figures on the ledger are changed, it's obvious to the millions of people who have copies of the ledger on their systems that something has been changed. It's been proposed by many people that blockchain should now be used for future Scottish ballots of all kinds, including elections and referendums. One person in particular, Martin Keatings, who I know personally, had worked for 5 years with some of his friends to actually create a blockchain system specifically to have a referendum. And his aim was to try to demonstrate and to force this to the fore, so that the Scottish Government would take notice of it and say, right, okay, this is a good idea, let's use it. Well, that's now happened, and in the news this week we discovered that the SNP has decided to use a form of blockchain, and they have tested it, which means that when we do vote in the new referendum, that you can be sure that your vote will be counted. And not only can you be sure it's counted, but you will be able to see it sitting on the ledger, and you'll be able to see if somebody tries to change it. The ledger, remember, will only accept the original vote. If any attempt is made to meddle with it, it will be rejected by the system. By the millions of other copies of ledger will compare it to the original, and it will be rejected, and the person who's tried to tamper with it would be discovered immediately. So blockchain is a fantastic way of either doing a transaction, or in the case of a referendum, placing a vote into a register of votes so it can be seen and counted by anybody using blockchain. It's a wide open, transparent system, and it means that anybody can monitor it, and that means millions of people will be able to monitor their own votes. And so when it comes to us voting, probably in the later part of this year on independence, we'll be able to see our votes for the first time. We'll also have a written receipt for our vote, which records how we voted and gives us a unique number. Now that means that your vote is registered on the system. Nobody can change it at all, ever. Nobody will be able to tamper with it without being discovered, and the British state can do nothing to undermine this system. It's entirely fair, and it's completely and utterly hack-proof. Nobody, unless they are capable of taking over millions of computers across the planet, can possibly hack blockchain. So it's good news. The Scottish Government has now accepted that blockchain should be used in all future votes. As far as I understand it, that's the word I'm hearing at the moment. So it's good news for the independence campaign. We should see a fair voting system that's controlled by a completely unique and unhackable and unimpeachable system. The British state can do nothing to actually gerrymander anything. They can't stuff votes, they can't invent people, they can't have dead people voting, they can't change votes from yes to no, they can't move votes from one pile into another. It's impossible. Blockchain is completely hack-proof and foolproof, and if you vote yes, your yes vote will stay there. If somebody else votes no, their no vote will stay there, and none of them will be able to be changed once they're cast. It's a great idea, and it's about time it was done. Congratulations to Martin Keatings and his friends for creating a system and putting enough pressure on the Scottish Government to actually finally do this, to take control of the electoral system away from Westminster, to stop all of the dirty tricks and the cheating that went on in the last referendum. The postal votes, because of this new system, postal voting can be abolished completely, because blockchain is a postal vote. The voting system is just done from a mobile phone or a tablet or a computer, and any one of these devices can be given to somebody who's lying in a hospital bed, who's housebound, and they can make their vote and know it's secure. They can even get a printout of the receipt to say how they voted, when they voted, and what number their vote is. And at any point during the referendum, all the way up until the final count, they can check that it's still there, and they'll be able to check that it's still there after the count. So it's fair for everybody. Yes or no voters, leavers or remainers, everybody can trust this system. Anyway, that's the news for today. If anybody has any comments on this, please let me know. But be sure to tune in to Dr. Mark McNaught's programme tonight. It's aired on Independence Live channel, which many of you already know about. But if you are in any doubt, just search Independence Live, and you will find the little icon for Independence Live, and you'll be able to watch our very own television channel, produced in Govan at studios on the other side of the river from me. Anyway, I'm off to do some work today, but I hope you all have a nice weekend, and that's the end of this week's news bulletin from Indycar. To those of you on YouTube who are new to watching the show, I hope you've enjoyed today's edition and continue to watch, and also remember to tell other people to watch the show as well. We're trying to spread the network as wide as we can, and YouTube is a new venture for us. So please, if you're on YouTube and you're watching on YouTube, share it with as many people as possible, and follow and subscribe to the channel if you can. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good weekend.